الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله الله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من أطاع الله ورسوله فقد رشد واهتدى ومن يعصيهما فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاءوا من بعدهم يقولون ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم صدق الله العظيم. My respected brothers and sisters, when we imagine about United States of America, the first thing which comes to our mind is, MashaAllah, freedom for everybody, civil rights for everybody, justice for everybody. And if there is any injustice or discrimination, we can talk to some of the civil rights movements and we can go to Supreme Court or we can lobby in the Congress and try to change those injustices and discriminations. Also, when we sometimes think about the African American community, many of us, may not be all of us, but many of us have got some kind of stereotypical perceptions. The first thing which comes to our mind is crimes, incarcerations, drugs, problems, challenges, all of these things. But we tend to forget that there was a time when there was United States of America, where there was the same constitution which is available to you and me, where there was the same kind of institution called the Supreme Court, but there was no equality in the United States of America. There were no civil rights for everybody except the white property holders in the United States of America. There was a time when the Congress was still there, when the Supreme Court was still there, and the Congress was passing the segregation bills and allowing killing and murder and lynchings of black people in this country. And the Supreme Court was approving of those lynchings and approving of the segregation in schools, in transportation, and even in the restaurants. Before 1965, just imagine, 1965, most of you will remember. In this country, the blacks and the minorities, especially the colored minorities, were not allowed to go to the same schools where your children and my children are going. The blacks and even the Jews and the other minorities were not allowed to sit and enjoy lunch or dinner in the same restaurant, in the same area of the restaurants where the white majority were allowed to eat. In this country, till 1965, there were separate places for the colored minorities when it comes to the transportation. In the public transportation or bus, the colored minorities and the blacks were not allowed to sit in the same place where the majority were allowed to sit in the bus. Specified seat for the color. And if the white master would come and somebody is sitting even in the black assigned seats, it was required in South that the colored person stands up and gives the seat to that white master. My brothers and sisters, so this America was not the exact same America which is coming to your mind and my mind. This America became what it is right now because of the struggles of hundreds and thousands of those whom we call slaves, and they were called slaves, and their descendants who struggled for freedom, for justice, for equality over more than 4 centuries. And especially when it comes to these issues, as Muslims, we need to understand the history of the black struggles or the African American community struggle, so that when we are enjoying the citizenship rights, when we are enjoying the freedom and the equality and the civil rights in this country, we express our thanks to those martyrs, to those people who were harassed, killed, and lynched because they demanded their human rights or their civil rights, or those who were killed just because they dared to say, "I am equal to you," and they were lynched and killed and hanged publicly in this country, and those hanging reports were coming in the newspapers, and people were boasting that I was the one who hanged him or her or killed him or her. Not just for the sake of appreciating the sacrifices of the African American community, but also as our Islamic responsibility. The ayah which I have recited from Surah Al-Hashr in front of you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises us, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. This is the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching the etiquettes of gratefulness and shukr to the people who came after the original Muhajirin and the original Ansar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِ, those people who came after the original Muhajirin and after the original Ansar who supported, established the Muslim community in the city of Medina, they do not find in their hearts any kind of resentment for the people who originally sacrificed everything to make Islam something viable. And then they make dua for them. Not only that they love them, they appreciate them, they respect their sacrifices, they also make the duas that, Ya Allah, Rabbana ighfir lana, Ya Allah, forgive us. وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ, and forgive our those brothers and sisters who preceded us in faith and iman and struggle. وَلَا تَجَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and do not let any kind of hatred, prejudice come to our heart for those brothers and sisters who preceded us in iman and in struggle. This is what is the etiquette of a Muslim. A Muslim, when he or she enjoys the bounty, when he or she is enjoying the rights in the United States of America, and is basically comparing this country with many of the so-called Muslim countries, where we see the suppression and the oppression and lack of democracy, and killing those people who are just asking for their basic rights in Syria, in Egypt, and everywhere else, where people are just saying, we are equal to you, or you the royals, or the elites, or the military tyrants, we want our rights. They are just asking, and they are being killed over there, tortured over there, Not in Tahrir and Rabaa and all of those, everywhere in Damascus and Halab and all of that. I mean, when we are looking at those things, we need to reflect upon it that we have come from those areas. Here, living in a non-Muslim country, in a non-Islamic country, alhamdulillah, we have got the voting rights, we have got the civil rights. Nobody is going to mutilate us in the masjid as our brothers and sisters are being mutilated in the masajid over there, or being killed because they have got the right of procession. No. But my brothers and sisters, we also need to ask ourselves, did we put the efforts and gain these rights? Or somebody put their blood and sweat and hard work, and you and me are reaping the fruits of those people's efforts? So as a part of our Islamic responsibility, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to appreciate the sacrifices of those people who did the work for us, who paved the way for us, and also seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them, and ask us not to entertain any prejudice or hatred or any sense of discrimination against those people. And I see it in my heart, I see it in the heart of so many Muslim brothers and sisters. I hear this word, these abid, these Sood, these blacks, these Negroes, ye kale, ye criminal. I know all of these words. But sometimes I truly believe that as the community, we are not showing the gratefulness to the sacrifices of the forefathers of the African American community, without whose efforts we would have not been sitting and enjoying all of these freedoms and whatever we are enjoying here in this country. So forgive me for being so blunt, but we need to find in ourselves, in our heart, to look at the history, to appreciate those sacrifices, and to look at their challenges and their crimes and whatever is connected with their name in the proper perspective, and try to help out the situation instead of just being discriminatory in our attitude. Anyhow, let's look at our beloved country. We say that our guarantees or our freedoms are given by the US Constitution. Now, the US Constitution was passed in 1787. And it was ratified by most of the states by 1789. So it became effective in 1789. But remember, till 1920, 1789, remember, till 1920, no woman in America was allowed to vote. Whether white or black, doesn't matter. No woman was allowed to own the property. Black, white, minority, doesn't matter. This is the same constitution. This is the same Declaration of Independence, which talks about the God-given inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This is the same constitution, and this is the same Declaration of Independence, which talks about the equality of human beings. All men are created equal. This phrase was written by Thomas Jefferson, who owned over 200 slaves. And I can tell you, I've got a lot of respect for Thomas Jefferson. And among the founding fathers, he is my favorite because he was a theologian, a philosopher, and also a revolutionary. He had, so much sympathetic approach to Islam. And he was the first one who hosted the Ramadan dinner in White House. Imagine. And sometimes I'm going to talk about Thomas Jefferson and the Islamic sympathies and how much he did for the equality of various communities. But remember, they were human beings. They are writing about the equality of all the human beings, and they are themselves owning slaves. Thomas Jefferson had more than 200 slaves, and actually, I'm not sure whether I should say it, no, most of his children are from his black slave girl, Sally Hemings. Most of his children. So basically, he's having children from the slaves, but he is not giving them the emancipation. George Washington, who presided over the convention, basically owned hundreds of slaves. And when they are writing the Constitution, all men are equal, or they are created equal, they found in themselves the courage to say, basically what? But the slavery is not going to be abolished because these people are not equal human beings. Imagine the same Constitution which is giving you and me the opportunity called equal to everyone was used to exclude the blacks because blacks, according to some of those people who were writing the Constitution, were not considered equal to others. The equality which was being talked about in the Constitution was for those white who were called minority. Remember that this used to be the English colony. And the Church of England was the controlling factor or power in United States of America before it became America. So what happens? The monarchical power is number one, the kings and the royal family. But the second tier of authority is the church. Now the church is the one which has got lands. Church is the one which is controlled by the bishops and by the priests. And these are the ones who are working as the eyes and spies of the royal family. They are the ones who preach on Sunday that you have to obey and respect your king because listening to king and his authority is equal to listening to the authority of God. So therefore, confession of Church of England and obeying its commandments was part and parcel of the British monarchical policy. Anybody who deviates from any aspect of the Church of England or in any way or form disagrees with anything of the Church of England was punished and was debarred from any office or property. Therefore, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Catholics, the Unitarians, the Quakers, all of them, they are Christians, they are white, they are European. But they were not allowed to have their property, they were not allowed to hold any kind of office in the government, and they were not allowed to vote. So when Thomas Jefferson and other founding fathers wrote that all men are equal, they were talking that all Christian white men are equal. That's where they incorporated every white Christian male into the voting opportunity by means of Constitution. And it was the efforts of the black community, the African American community, that the amendment was passed, and then everybody, you and me, were included in that category of men. Wallahi, my brothers and sisters, we owe it to them. Sometimes I feel very sad when nobody knows the struggles and the efforts of those people who gave us what we have got right now. And then we have got all of that kind of typical type of attitude, and we forget that here we are enjoying because of the efforts of these people. At the same time, now, because the time is short, slavery was abolished as a result of many slaves participating in the American Revolutionary Wars. When the Americans, they wanted freedom from Britain, some of the slaves, they were given the opportunity of freedom or the promise of freedom by the English, so they fought for them, but majority of them, they showed their loyalty to their masters and to the land and fought against the British powers. So when they got the freedom, even then they were not given the equal opportunity. They have to participate in the Civil War, where the North is fighting against the South. So the Federalist forces, they said, if you fight for us and we gain hegemony over the South, we will give you the freedom. So here, all of those people, the slaves, who came from West Africa, who came from East Africa, and many of the other areas, they participated in the Civil War and supported the North against South. And as a result of victory, they were given the right or the emancipation from slavery. But even then, only the male blacks were allowed to vote. And wallahi, my brothers and sisters, sometimes, you smile and you are astonished how human beings, they utilize or they manipulate other people, and when they are done using them, they throw them like a trash. This is what has been happening in the history, and this is what is happening nowadays in our human relation. People think they are smart, they use you, and after that they never appreciate a single thing you do and just trash it like nothing. This has been part and parcel of even the American history. So now when these African Americans, they participated in the wars of the North, now what happens? Many of the states, they accept this federal law that the males are allowed to vote, but then they initiate some amendments in their state laws, state legislation. What are those amendments? That only those people who pay poll tax can vote. So majority of the African Americans, they have not paid the tax, so they are excluded. Those people who own property can vote. These are the poor people who were slaves, now they cannot vote. So when even some of them, they showed, okay, we have paid poll tax or we have property, then there was another class which is literary test or literacy test, that the people who just know how to read and write can vote only. So this way, even though these people were given in 1865 the Emancipation Act or the right to vote, but practically they were not allowed to vote, especially in the southern states, and they have to struggle through the codes and through different kinds of opportunities and articles just to demand their right of voting. And then what happens when the Supreme Court passed the law that yes, they can vote, and even African American women can vote, then think of Ku Klux Klan and the other militias who started harassing and embarrassing and intimidating them by means of every possible terrorism. And that's where what happens, these mobs, these militias, they are going after every registered voter and not letting them to come to vote or to register for voting. And those who insist that we are going to vote, they were terrorized. And I'm sure you must have heard this concept or this understanding of the word lynching. When first time I came to United States of America, and one of the African American brothers, he mentioned that they used to have the Martin Luther King breakfast. And as a leader, Muslim leader, so I was invited to give, prayer. I heard the word lynching. I do not know even what is lynching, and everybody else was nodding their head. I went back and looked at the word lynching and looked at the history. I was astonished that I have never heard something horrible in my life. What was lynching? Some of these supremacists, they disagree with somebody. He's assertive, he's vocal, he says, I want to vote. They say he has looked at this white girl, or he has raped her, or he has done such and such. And without taking him to the court, extrajudicial lynching was that the mob will get together, they will bring that person out, man or woman, torture them, either kill them, or hang them, or burn them alive on the stake. If you go back to the records, there are more than 5,000 people's names which are reported in newspaper from 1890 to 1920. Within 30 years, more than 5,000 people were publicly hanged by mobs, not by the court. And this is what was reported in the newspaper. The historians, they say, these are the records which are available in the newspaper. But if you go back to South or some of the other northern states, more than 35,000 blacks were lynched by the mobs. Imagine, my brothers and sisters, this equality which you and me are enjoying did not come that easy. It has got the blood of many of the people whom we do not even remember, know, or even appreciate, and sometimes have got very bad, negative kind of perceptions about them. Let's not even talk about the lynching part. Now, the civil liberties movement, even now, the government, the Congress, the Supreme Court, and all of those agencies are saying the African Americans, the blacks, the whites, everybody in this country is equal. But then the Jim Crow laws basically are saying segregation. Yeah, they are equal maybe in your side, but in our side they are not equal. They cannot go to the same school. They cannot go to the same hospital. They cannot sit in the same bus. Initially it was like that, and then total segregation. I do not have the time to go. Just go back and look at segregation or look at the civil rights movements. And that's where Martin Luther King, John Duffy, Rosa Parks, we just name it, Malcolm X, Malik Shahbaz, all of them. These are the people, they felt that going to the Supreme Court, lobbying in the Congress is not working. We need to do something. That's where they started the non-violence resistance. Rosa Parks, when in Salem or in Montgomery, Alabama, she went and sat in the bus and did not stand up for the white master or for somebody who was white and came and was expecting her to stand up. She said, no, I am an equal human being. I'm an American. I'm going to sit over there on my seat. You know what happened? Then Montgomery, bus social boycott and all of those marches on Washington, and from Montgomery to Salem, Alabama, all of these marches, they were not sufficient for the Congress to pass the voting rights for all blacks or for all human beings. John Cheney, a 22 years old young man, who goes over there to Mississippi to basically help register some of the black votes, was beaten to death in such a fashion that not a single part of his body was without injury. His body was found in the muddy dam. And when the pictures of that poor guy came on the national television, that's where the President Kennedy and after him the others, they were able to push the government and to push the nation to give them the rights of equal voting. And that's the act of voting which was passed in 1965 is what gives me and you the opportunity to vote and not be lynched or not be tortured. So my brothers and sisters, we need to remember these heroes. We need to remember those brothers and sisters who came from West Africa, who helped build this country, who sacrificed everything from the Civil War to World War I to World War II to make this country what it is right now. And to bring it to the sense of equality where everybody else can benefit from it. These are the heroes who need to be remembered, who need to be appreciated, and who need to learn from those sacrifices. The month of February is the month of Black History Month. So we need to learn that history so that we can adopt the good things from them and also help them in their challenges and the sufferings they are going through right now. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. My brothers and sisters, we the Muslim community, we have got our own challenges. The same kind of discrimination, stereotyping, instilling the fears in the mind of general population is taking place about the Muslims. And now you know, the Constitution is a piece of paper. Congress, they are human beings. Supreme Court can go this way or can go that way. Nothing is guaranteed in the world. Those nations who do not come together and put the efforts, or do not know how to stand up for their rights, or to defend themselves, these are the nations which are forgotten in this world, and nobody respects them. We need to learn from our African American brothers how they struggled, how they arrived at certain kind of institutions, what type of things worked for them, what type of things did not work for them, and we need to start incorporating those institutions into our community. Because you never know what happens and what can happen in this part of the world or in any part of the world. A Muslim is a wise follower. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-hikmatu dalatil mu'min, that wisdom is the last commodity of a believer. Wherever he or she finds it, gets it. Does not matter whether it comes from the black or whites or Arabs or non-Arabs, Muslims or non-Muslims. As a community, we need to learn about the history of the African American, and we need to be, as a community, strong so that we can defend our rights and we can stand against our challenges.